Welcome in. Open wide the doors to fandom. I'm the spirit of film himself. And as I've mentioned a few times recently, there's been a handful of small delays. But the one thing that I have never faltered on, and the one thing the fandom's finest has never faltered on, is Superman. I would not be, I don't know what the right word is for it, but certainly would not be, say, insulted, for lack of a better word. I would not be insulted at all if somebody said that we have just a Superman channel, or anything that somebody would say is, they might say it as like a put down, they're Superman fanboys and all that. That wouldn't bother me at all in the slightest. I'm a big fan of the character. It's a great character, and I love the idea of discussing, or the discussions about it, or anybody else, even if they got something bad to say about it. I love listening to how wrong you are. No, I'm just kidding. But it's just a big fan of Superman in general, and I've been that way for a long time. From the earliest days of my memory, Superman has always been a part of the landscape. I mean, from entertainment and clothing, and people would have jokes and stories, mentioning Superman, trying to crack in on a friend at work or somebody on the playground, right? Just you name it. Superman was he's been a big part of the culture of, especially America, which is where I grew up, so that's what I can speak to. Yeah, I mean, there's characters all over the place, but only one of them has soared above all others. And I'm delighted to have been a kid whose childhood involved that, and seeing the character plastered everywhere. Even if the character itself, as I said, if he was above all others, then within the 80-year history of Superman, then there's one of the actual Supermen who soared above the others. Who soared. It's kind of weird. But the guy, I mean, no, seriously though, there really is one true Superman. And that would be the Salkind produced epic masterpiece, directed by Richard Donner, Christopher Reeve. Perfection. Absolute Superman is Christopher Reeve, 100%. The Max Fleischer serials, they're up there. Those 1940 animations, that they just, I mean, I would say they fly just below the level of the Reeve Superman. What separates them is having that perfect performance. With Christopher Reeve, he was able to give the full performance. He's actually on the screen. And instant classic. No question about it. It's similar to your legendary sports dynasties, that slight difference between Chicago's Perfect Six or Joe Montana's Perfect Legacy, for all you sports fans out there. That's the difference with Reeve. And that's what Superman the movie is. Christopher Reeve was that special person that he anchored a legacy. He's what anchors the legacy in place. If that's the case, then what's the heart of it? What's the core? The core that keeps it together to this day. I mean, 4 decades later, the true heart of Superman the movie is a reverence for the material. Everything that's come since revolves around different, and I say that with parentheses. I mean, look it up, Google search it. The promotions for Superboy, Lois and Clark, Smallville, Man of Steel, especially most recently, and so on. And what's going to stand out is, again, think of it in parentheses. You're going to hear stuff or read stuff like, well, this is a different Superman, a new take, a different version, modern. Imagine Marvel Studios announcing they want to make a film after Avengers 4 or whatever the next one is, and that they're going to wait 20 years, and then when they do, they'll produce them in the exact opposite way that they've built the current MCU. That's basically what's happened with Superman. So if you're to go back to the Christopher Reeve era, when Christopher Reeve was flying across the screen, what you had as the key components, you would hear adventure, excitement, right? And the sort of the ultimate mind-blowing escape. That was the formula they were trying to go for. There's all this talk about Richard Donner, and yes, I know I've heard it too, that the verisimilitude and the idea that it has to be somewhat real and grounded. And a lot of people have said that's what Christopher Nolan borrowed for the trilogy. With the Dark Knight, and that's why that was good, because he picked that one little piece out to keep it grounded. So you don't have Clayface and Mr. Freeze. It's all grounded in reality against the mafia. But that's just sort of something that's been out there. It's not totally true. I mean, it's a character that can fly. I mean, he's super powered. Look at the time frame when the character was unchallenged as number one from 1938 through the mid 90s. And it's in the heart of that time frame, that's when Superman the movie was crafted. And they crafted it with the character's best elements in mind. They had a true reverence for it. Look up what Tom Mankiewicz talks about. Look up what Donner talks about. When they really are like, they're huge fans and true fans. So when you add all that together, and then it's coming together on film, you bring in John Williams at the peak of his prowess, coming right around Star Wars time and all that. So the music from John Williams, it's iconic. It's still used to this day. Sporting events, you name it. John Williams theme, the Superman theme, that pretty much defines what iconic means. But that doesn't just happen by accident. You have to have a great film on the screen to work with. Otherwise, like, when he kind of saw some parts of 2 and he saw 4, he just maybe wanted to sort of back away and give some of his friends a chance to come in and finish the music for him. But not with the first one. And that's really the thing. You look at every component of Superman the movie. Again, just use Williams as an example. He's not only is he creating his new themes, that iconic theme, but he's able to weave in little pieces from the Fleischer serials, those Sammy Timberg's little cues here and there pop up within the actual theme that John Williams came up with. I mean, you don't do that if you don't have a respect for what's come beforehand, or you don't have a respect for the people that have worked on it, right? You would do it completely opposite, and maybe just sort of, drum notes that repeat, not to single out anybody in particular. Really, but again, that just seems to be the number one thing that is missing. When you look at what's going on now, all the conversations, even if they claim to have a respect for the character, everything seems to be about what can we do different? What can we add as our little twist? And what can we sort of make, again, make it more modern for today's audiences? And not necessarily looking at, okay, that's good and well. You're a new crew, you're new actors, you're a whole new team. So naturally you're going to have a new take on it. But what are the things from the history that you like about the character? To me, what has been the sort of missing component for 20 some odd years with the character. Whereas again, within Warner Brothers, look at what they did with Harry Potter. You have directors like Alfonso Cuarón comes in and talks about that, number one, because he sees how much people love and respect the character, including, I think he said, his children. So he just, there was no way for him to say no. He has to take this job as directing the second Harry Potter film, or the third film. But not only that, he talks about, I'm such a big fan, and J.K. Rowling's writing about this, and I get to work with this character. That's sort of missing, or it's not sort of, it just generally is mostly flat out missing. And I have a great respect for David S. Goyer as a writer, but when you go back and look at how they went into Man of Steel, he talked about how much respect he had for Superman the movie. But the thing that opened up the story for him was a negative point. He talked about how in the original Superman the movie, they Lois Lane blows off Superman mentioning that he's from Krypton, where he thought, well, that's the story right there, and why would she blow it off? And how? I mean, it just blew his mind that they didn't focus on that. Well, you're an alien. This is a first contact. So as much as I respect him, and I did like a lot of what was in Man of Steel, when you look at that, the thread that he pulled on it was a negative thread. And if you're starting from somewhere that's a negative place, it's hard to weave that thread back in a positive way. And so when you look at Man of Steel, people talked about it's kind of a downer, it's kind of a bummer, and it ends with, Goyer talked about purposely putting Superman in Sophie's Choice, and spoilers, I'm sure you've all heard if you haven't seen, but that's why it does end on kind of a bummer note, with Zod's broken neck being snapped by Superman, and Superman has been given this awful choice. And well, if you're starting from a negative place, then it makes sense you're going to finish that way. I know there's a million different things that people would say about that in general, but that's just something that I really have been thinking about lately. And coming up here this following week, I'm actually going to take a trip in the theater and see it. Will be the first time in my life that I've watched Superman the movie on the big screen. And there's another release coming, and I watched a little bit of Man of Steel the other night, and I thought to myself, as far as movie going goes for this character, and it's not even a nostalgic thing. It's just the idea. It's a damn good movie. It's a damn fine movie. One of the best movies ever made. That I always say is the genre of the superhero comic book films. And to be able to go and see something like that is going to be I'm not sure how it's going to work out for me, but I'm going to bring in Scrapsta here. You've heard me go on here a bit about all kinds of things, but I'm just sort of curious about what are your thoughts on what I laid out there? But more importantly, what are your thoughts on Superman the movie itself, Christopher Reeve, and the 40-year legacy? There's some films that came out. I mean, the Transformers films. I don't think they're going to have a 40-year span. It's not going to have legs to run 40 years from now. I'm not sure Shia LaBeouf and Megan Fox are going to be doing epic anniversary events for. I mean, I could be wrong, and I'm not trying to put them down, but what are your thoughts though on where we stand now with Superman?
Well, just off of what you said, I agree. You nailed it right on the head. It is still a standing. It's still like the best, honestly. Christopher Reeve. It's funny because you had mentioned on there all of the different takes that have come after and how they've also do a different take. The funny thing is, the first two you said right after, I think, were Superboy and Lois and Clark.
Yeah.
The funny thing is with those, as they were trying to go different, you oftentimes, if you see an interview with either of the actors, the two actors who played Superboy or Dean Cain, oftentimes they'll always say, even if the direction was, let's go somewhere else, you'll always often hear, we wanted to try and do what Christopher Reeve did. Because that was Superman. So right. For the studio, they may have been like, I want to do different overall. For them, the thought was, this is Superman. And that's the way I've always seen it. Like, Christopher Reeve is Superman. Like, for me, people always throw, who was the best Batman? Oh, Christian Bale played a really good Batman. Joker was a good version. Heath Ledger was a good version of Joker. I always just saw Christopher Reeve as Superman, not Christopher Reeve playing Superman. It was that's Superman. Yeah, I think I've mentioned this with you before. That for me,
with no argument.
It's like, it's not. Oh, he did a good job at playing him. Henry Cavill, he's doing a good job playing him. And he's real. That sounds kind of a put down. No, he's doing real good. He's one of my favorites of all time that did it, probably right under Reeve. But Reeve for me didn't come across like he's playing this character. It's that he is Superman. That's how I always took it. That's how I still take that. But yeah, as far as 40 years, I mean, no, I don't think any movie's gonna have the kind of legacy that this one has. Even they are re-airing. I think they just recently did like some of the Dark Knights or the Dark Knight recently.
Yeah,
I'm not entirely sure that even and that's a great movie. I don't know if that's gonna have that same long-lasting kind of presence of 40 years. I'm not sure that is, because the key thing is, not only is Superman the movie a great movie, it's the one that it all stands on. If Superman the movie doesn't happen, or if it's a bad movie, we're not having all these movies. Some people, I hope that would have been the case, so we wouldn't have all these movies.
We're at that point now, where some people are just like,
right.
Well, even Salkind says, we're invaded by comic book movies. I think that's what he said. I just love. I just, to get off topic, I always wonder though, Salkind, is that a put on? Does he really talk like that, or is that just like, leave me alone? I don't want to talk about this anymore. It's like,
I don't know.
I just like, we're invaded by Superman, but superhero movies.
Right.
I'm tired. Leave me alone.
But it's such a great film, and as I said, if it's not it. I don't think we have all the movies.
Yeah, well, that's the thing that it's astonishing to me in two ways. In that you never really truly know what's going on in Hollywood, because you'll hear a certain story for 15 years, and then a documentary will come out, and so for 5 years you think it's something different, and then in the middle of some scandal or something, you find out that actually both of those stories were all lies. Here's the real story, right? It's Hollywood's a weird place, but. You hear Tom Mankiewicz talk about how he sort of pointed out Tim Burton to the studio, and that this kid's coming, and this kid could be the future, and that he had a couple of cracks at the Batman screenplay, not the one that got filmed, but just what was getting them rolling and moving things along. And it's again, they went to him, and that he tried to approach it similar to how people would have approached, or how they approached, I should say. Superman the movie, because that's how you would want to go about it. And I know this, I'm sure going to anger a lot of Batman fans out there. You brought up the Dark Knight trilogy, but I mean, it's undeniable. Nolan has admitted. In fact, he talked about that famous word, verisimilitude. It's the grounded idea. And I think people run with that a little too much. But he's got an interview, I think, on the Blu-ray set is Donner being interviewed by Nolan, I believe. I think it was the second time, and I know I've sort of frustrated you for years with this because I always said Batman Begins the best, it's better than Dark Knight, and all this kind of a big another story, right? I'll tell you now what the heart of that is that the second time I watched it, and I was blown away the first time, but I was like jaw dropped, and my jaw is only, I mean, I've only sat there stunned staring at the screen with my jaw dropped only a handful of times, and you're talking about when the first time I watched The Godfather Part 2, right? Which is, I mean, two movies that you would. Like, it was almost like I was in a daze. I feel like I woke up in the middle of the credits for The Godfather Part 2, like, masterpiece. I get it now. I'm old enough, to have watched it now. And I had that similar experience, again, in the middle of the credits for Batman Begins, because it really clued in for me. I was like, you know what? Not only is this movie really good, and this movie is like so underrated, it's one of the, I think one of the best movies ever made. And it's not because he was trying to copy or steal from Superman, but again, Superman the movie set that template, and he hits a lot of those exact same story beats for a totally different character in a totally different film and a totally different time. Now I'm going to anger all the Marvel fans. It's not Sam Raimi who's just straight up lifting parts of Superman the movie and the franchise, right out, saves the his little girlfriend from falling off the side of a building as he runs up and opens up his shirt to expose the heroic symbol, and then Chris Reeves says, I'm a friend, and then friendly neighborhood spider, that whole, then the list goes on from there. That's actually kind of funny because I saw the Spider-Man movie and I just could never take the Raimi movie seriously because I'm like, I've seen all this before in a much better film with much better performances. No, Lego costumes and Power Ranger outfits with the green. What is he? He's the Green
Goblin.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Anyway, whatever. We're not talking about Marvel. Forget it. Who cares? And then even in number 2, he loses his powers for a time, goes through the trial and all that kind of stuff. Right? He faces the iconic. Anyways, it goes on from there. So it's like I looked at the Spider-Man films and never could take them seriously, but Batman in the dark, specifically Batman Begins, did it on the other side of it, which was, again, respecting those main points, right? And I do not think it's fair. A lot of people say, well, the Donner and Mankiewicz, they just copied Joseph Conrad's, the hero's journey. That's what makes it. And I don't buy into it. I don't believe that's the case, right? Because I think more Luke Skywalker is the hero's journey in Star Wars. The closest thing in Superman is because he comes from this great society that is no longer with us, because that's the main thing with the Joseph Conrad hero's journey, is that you find out you come from nobility or royalty. That's but see, that's why I don't think it works with Luke, because you find out he's Vader's son, Anakin, blah 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 blah, down the line. All you Star Wars fans, it. But I think that's really the closest thing with Superman. Is that okay? Yeah, he comes from a great race of people, but it's it's the Kents, it's Jonathan Kent, right? That Glenn Ford, it's just one masterpiece scene after another in that film. Sorry, it's just everything that you could, the henchmen, maybe what people could say is the worst scene in the movie is the Otis scene. I know it drags a little bit, even for 70s movies, it drags a little bit because Otis screws up spoilers. Otis screws up I don't know why I say that for a 40-year-old film, but Otis screws up the numbers for he's trying to set the rockets in the wrong direction, and then that's the trope though, right? It's set the standard for the trope that there's not necessarily a goofy sidekick, but they have to sort of trick people and trick the military, to get on with your plan, and you're setting this big thing up and you're co-opting this big military weapon like the it's not the oxygen destroyer, that's the Godzilla movie. What is it in Batman Begins? It's the MacGuffin of the film. It's I forget what it is. Microwave emitter. That's right. Yeah. Ridiculous. Which always, again, it's that thing. And I know Roger Ebert talked about it. Said, now there is an inventive. He was famously said it's the most inventive thing I've ever seen in a comic book movie. But think about this: if the microwave emitter, if it's powerful enough to vaporize a water supply in a city, then when they turn it on, because there's a line that I forgot the one line. It's sort of a one-liner that they're standing next to it, so shouldn't he deliver his one-liner and then all the water in their bodies go, they all should all have just like shriveled up like little. So there's a goof there in Batman Begins where there's not a goof there in Superman the movie, because you can read, I'm sure it's not as simple as the way they did it, but the idea is that he co-opted these missiles, and the point was that they couldn't shoot them down. They would avoid being shot down. That's why the general's, catch and knock him down. And then the guy from Cheers is like, I'm drunk. No, they got the, it's the anti-takedown. I don't know what he says, but, I forgot the exact line, right? But he's got you're the general, you should know that. Anyways. But, no, it's not as bad a goof as it is in Batman Begins, where if it can vaporize the water all the way down to the pipelines, so wouldn't it kill everybody near it? So even if you say, well, that's the worst scene and it's kind of goofy, it's like, really? Because 40 years ago, it's better thought out than Nolan did recently, and Nolan is supposed to be the untouchable master.
Fair point. I didn't even think of that till you said. I was like, yeah, wait a minute. But I one thing I did hear you say that kind of has me shocked a little bit. This upcoming viewing is going to be the first time you've seen the movie in the theaters?
I've never seen it in a movie theater proper. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Well, how would I? I know there are re-releases, but
yeah, because I saw in 2006. I think they re-released. Well, that's the thing. They've never had at least not over here. They haven't had official releases.
Oh, okay,
yeah. Yeah, I kind of cut it off, so I sound like
I was
like,
fish.
What? No, they never had
the Joker fish.
A big official release of it. I know, but sometimes, in the summertime, they would have. Wasn't the summer? It was in March or whatever in 2006. They had where they would show old movies for cheap prices.
Oh,
and then
okay,
they had. That's the first time I saw it in the theater.
Well, it was 2000, and ironically, it was 2006 when a friend of mine, he said the same thing. He's like, they replay it all the time, and there was another jaw for a different reason. It was a jaw dropping over. I was like, really? Wait, what? Really? And he's like, yeah, no, but I've never been anywhere in a city at a time where it's been done. So I've heard of things on and off, but it's never. And then of course, if it's reshown, it's going to be in the sort of $3, like you said, the cheap movie theater. Even hell, Superman Returns. When I saw that, I was in the city at the time, but the only theater I could make it to at that time was just one of those. It wasn't a cheap, Tuesday $3 ticket, but it was the Scream's old school screen, a very old school. So in other words, kind of crappy. But so that's Superman Returns. So that's also the thing that it's never. I never thought I just never thought they'd re-release it this way. And then also the 2001, the special edition was supposed to be re-released in theaters, and then they canceled it. For me, I just thought it was never going to happen. It's sort of like I put my head down about that kind of stuff. Not like I'm depressed. I mean, I put my head down and did other things, and I just never thought it would happen, because I know we've mentioned this in other recordings and whatnot. But yeah, the DVDs, the first run of them weren't so good. Even I think the first couple of Blu-rays had some problems, and it's mostly all been fixed now. And I'm sure the new Blu-ray and I'm sure the 4K I've been hearing good things about it so far. I don't have 4K set up right now, so I can't speak at the moment. But yeah, no, it's so for me, this is, I mean, I'm really trying to avoid the cliche and the hyperbolic talk that, it's like going to Mecca or going to the Vatican or all that kind of thing. Really trying to avoid that. But it kind of is in a way. I mean,
yeah,
just the credit sequence. I mean, and well, again, I don't want to get. I'm not trying to bore everybody out there with tell you every personal story I have with the film and whatnot. But yeah, I just some things happen, and because of that, it was sort of attached. The thing in my life going on was attached somewhat to the Superman character. So I made a point actually to not sit down and watch the original, the 78 version. I haven't watched it in 12 years. I've seen cuts, clips, and you look up all kinds of stuff, but I actually haven't had a proper sitting to sit down and absorb it all. And so, when that much time passes, it's like I can't remember what I was doing 12 years ago when I watched it. I think maybe it would have had to have been that Christopher Reeve collection box set where he was on that famous image, the conspiracy theory that they put that image in Man of Steel, that image of him where supposedly it switches over to, yeah, but that image comes from that. But it's a beautiful painted box set. And yeah, it will have been that probably then, but even then I sort of didn't sit down and watch all the way through. I just, I made sure it played. And so it's 40 years since the release. I wasn't alive. I wasn't alive. I think I was chewing on, a binky when number 4 came out. So I mean, you're talking about 1990, 91. I was starting to form my consciousness literally and start watching the cartoons and tapes and recorded from 4 of them on one tape, one of those things. It's just like all 4 of them on one tape. Matter of fact, our Madam Producer over here, Madam Secretary, do you remember throwing away the first 2 on? This is running down this. Our producer was with me at the time and threw away the first 2 by accident. It is claimed. I don't believe it. I believe it was a cruel punishment. No, all jokes aside, though, I mean, my memories are going to go back to then. I'm going to have memories of running around and watching an old, completely square 80s television with the bunny ears antenna and tinfoil on the window behind it, and stuff like that. It's going to go back to that. Really tacky curtains from the 80s, and wallpaper. If people still have wallpaper in their homes, I don't think so. Maybe fancy people, but I haven't seen it recently. See, I mean, it's really going to be like going back to being 4 years old and running around and watching it. And I think for a lot of different reasons, but I'm most looking forward to seeing on the big screen, the biggest of big digital screens. Looking forward to seeing the credit sequence in particular, because that by itself, that will be Mecca. That will be the Vatican. That will be the Sistine Chapel, because it seems like the one rite of initiation, the rite of passage that I've missed, because everybody seems to talk about, we didn't expect what was coming and all this kind of thing. Then all of a sudden, dun 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 dun, and then that big S comes across it. And I believe it was a Hollywood director that talked to me. He was just like, this is effing Superman. This is what it's all, like, I've missed all that. Right. I'm kind of looking for that rite of passage and awaiting that moment. I don't know. What's your? I
have a very bad thing to admit to. So, well, first, one thing I'll say is, as far as watching it in the theater, this is a different kind of thing, because the one I saw was like the special edition. Like they aired the special edition, not in the big release that they were supposedly going to do, but then it got canceled. But then eventually they did in the small cheap theater, like, oh, here's the Superman, put on, and it was the special edition one of it. So you recently, I think it was this week, you asked me, hey, did you know about these releases that they were going to re-air Superman for the 40th anniversary? I actually did and already saw it and just assumed you had known about it.
Well, I got the date wrong for some reason.
You were like a big fan, so I assumed you knew, and you was like, oh, I guess he was just too busy, so he didn't come out.
Yeah.
But I already watched this, and I like feel bad that I was like, oh, he didn't even know. I could have seen if he wanted to go with us or whatever and watch it. But yeah, so I felt a little bit of a guilty admission.
Yeah,
I was like, oh, he didn't even know. Dang, I assumed he did.
Well, I'd heard it was coming out, but I somehow have had a lot going on, so I got the date mixed up, and for some reason I thought it was the 10th of December they were going to start and run through. But yeah, then it was, I want to say maybe Thanksgiving night or something. I happened to look it up, and I was like,
weekend.
Yeah, I was like, oh, it's coming. Oh, crap. And the 3rd, and I could have done it the most recent one, but I just picked the 3rd. Okay. Yeah, it's closer to the actual 40th, because I think the 10th is the actual.
That's the thing that I was like, I was like, maybe I should have gone that day, though, because that's closer. It came out in December. It would have been better to go in December.
It just felt right, 7 p.m. also, so I felt like, okay,
Yeah, I watched it
I'm pretty sure I would have seen a night showing in the 70s if I was bouncing around with an
3
afro.
Felt very weird, and that's the time ours was. It was at 3. It was like, 3 o'clock. Okay, that's kind of weird. But reason I bring that up is because, I'll be honest, the title screen, I was like, okay, it's going to start. Here we go. Just excited. And the title screen comes up. And for some reason, even after watching the special edition in the theater, I feel like I was not ready for the title screen. It was like, when it came up, there was like just a huge grin on my face. I was like,
yeah.
and perhaps, I'm not quite sure, perhaps a tear from my eye. I'm not quite sure on that.
It was a tear of respect.
Yes.
Well, I would fully expect, and I would imagine there's going to be a handful of scenes where I'm just gonna. There's probably going to be a moment where I'm just going to realize I'm in the theater watching Christopher Reeve's Superman the movie.
I think that's what happened to me when the opening credit came on, because it was like, this is happening.
Yeah, this is Superman.
Yeah.
This is it.
This is
D1.
Superman. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
I'm sorry. There's nothing that's will ever come close. I don't care if it's 40 years later. Could be 80 years later now. But I'm sorry. It's just The Dark Knight. Didn't expect it. Batman Begins didn't expect it. Superman Returns really didn't expect that. Man of Steel, and I know we've talked about it just between me. Yeah, there's just other experiences with this kind of thing, and I mean, the only thing that'll ever come close for me is that you look back on it now. I know a lot of people are just like, yeah, it's 50 years too much, but Star Trek, I think just past its 50th anniversary, I think, of Star Trek. And I mean, I wasn't around for the original show, but I had no concept of that. I just knew that I liked this thing that was on reruns all the time. And The Next Generation it was a little rough to get into, but it's kind of cool and stuff. And so now when I look back, it's like, wow, I saw, at that time was the 25th anniversary, which I can't believe it's even been that long. But it was the 25th anniversary, and I saw Star Trek when it was still Star Trek. And I saw Star Trek with Kirk and Bones and Spock, and this was their farewell, the final send off, and of course now we know, especially now that there's never going to be those three on screen again. Maybe if they wise up, they'll do something and throw Shatner in there for some kind of an angle. I don't even know if they're going to make a new. It's all haywire right now. The new show is all over the place, but I look back on that with a lot of fond memories. And then even the Next Gen, because I heard that Stewart is coming back for something. It's a mess what they're doing. Whatever, Star Trek is a mess right now. But to look back on it and say, yeah, that's kind of the closest thing that I could have. Is like, and I think back, I was like, man, I was there to watch that handoff. I saw Picard and Kirk on the screen at the same time, and all that. I saw the Decline too. But the Insurrection and Nemesis, they weren't especially nowadays, they weren't the worst movies ever made. They certainly weren't the worst movies you could see in a franchise that takes place in space. No names, please. The butchers that own another particular right now. Yeah, so this is the total. In fact, I think that's heightened it even more. This is perfect timing for me. Now that I mentioned it, I thought about it now, just this instant. Because somebody was recently sort of saying to me, and I've seen other YouTube channels that are popular, and they've talked about it, that did you ever think you would live long enough, just because they really hated Discovery, the new show, right? And so somebody had commented, did you think you'd live long enough to see everything crash and burn and everything? If, it just, again, not trying to get too personal, but I mean, there are certain sports teams that I rooted for, and they've crashed and burned, and they're an absolute embarrassment now, where it would used to, but even sports in general, used to, I wasn't a big Bulls fan. I wasn't a huge Michael Jordan fan. I kind of didn't get it all, understand it all at that time frame, right? I did see the final game and the final shot and all that, and I understood that was something important, but I really couldn't grasp it. But I understood there was a sort of a mystique to sports at that time, just like there was a mystique to movies and whatnot. And even talk about Star Trek, go back to the first film, one of the first Me Too things came out of one of the actors who was in Star Trek the motion picture, and he's an important character, and it sets up a lot of stuff, and he got caught up in it's like it wasn't this untouchable thing for Hollywood entertainment and sports, and all that's kind of gone the wayside, and especially the last couple of years. I think the last 5 years the last 5 years, watching some of these franchises literally crash and burn, and watching just absolutely embarrassing things happen with, forget about taking the heroes and deconstructing the heroes and making the villains more interesting. Forget about all that. Now it's just the straight up, I think the term is emasculate or demasculate. Forget about that. It's not even, it goes well beyond it. It's just downright embarrassing. Certain characters are down on their knees taking a milk shower, but it's like, names. But I mean, just to see that. And then now you get to go back to the theater and watch something that has for 40 years remained perfect,
right,
and properly, in the most incredible way, remain in this. I mean, it's like a national monument. Again, not trying to get too hyperbolic. I understand. Come on, not that. I understand. Go to Washington D.C. There's, I'm just speaking that way. Kind of over the top. But as far as this little, in this world, in this realm of things, in the fandom and being, all the fanboys and fangirls out there and growing up with this stuff. Yeah, this one, it is Christopher Reeve Superman the movie. This is like a national monument of comic book geeks and nerds, and And I have no regrets and there's no negativity there for me. It's like, there it is.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, it's going to be a sight to behold. I'm sure, like you said, I'm sure I'm going to have several lone one, tears of respect, followed by others continuously, I'm sure. I mean, who cares? Again, at this point, it's just, even if you're somebody, which I know some people don't understand my fascination, don't understand my sort of Superman fandom at all, but of course they're big Marvel fans and they're in their corner. But even if you're on that side of it, cherish what you have now, because if you think that Infinity War is just perfect and the MCU is 20 perfect films or however many, if you think that's exceptional, now think about how you'll feel 40 years from now if you're lucky to be around and you can go back and revisit these. It's that kind of an element, and this one, of course, way better in every way. Right. But that's not my opinion. That's fact. But no, I mean it is. When the whole thing was over. I mean, well, did you stay through the credits? Was it that again? This is a film that is so good. There's no after credits, but you still have to stay for the credits because it's incredible. It's like being treated to a John Williams symphony.
Right.
There's no after credit sequence, but there's just little things that you watched on VHS that you want to see, the glowing credits. You want to see that. Isn't it at the very end, right? Doesn't it say coming soon #2, right? Or
I don't remember. Actually, we left after the movie. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah. No, yes, obviously we stayed for the whole thing.
Yeah.
It did say that too. They showed the original cut, so obviously it still says on there.
Is that happening? Are they bringing the others back?
I don't think so. I think they just did it for this, but
I just got a message.
Oh, did you? Ooh.
Some theaters will be doing a marathon. I'm looking at it right now. Yeah, because I don't know if you can. Maybe you want to come around and look at this real quick.
Yes,
you're gonna love this, and it's because a friend of mine sent me this, and it's Christopher Reeve. It says Superman the movie 40th anniversary, but it says 40 years, 4 films. Superman the movie, the extended cut. Superman 2, the Donner cut. Superman 3, the expanded cut. Which, what is that?
I have never heard of this Superman 3 expanded cut.
I just love Superman 4 original cut. I just love that. That's
original cut.
Everything is special. Superman 4 original cut. Whatever. But it doesn't matter though, because the original cut is masterful, and it's it's a good death is its own Feora, right? The good death is Superman 4 is its own reward. So that doesn't need any. This is perfect. You want to talk about a film that's perfect, anyways. And then he said, yeah, select theaters will be playing marathons. I don't know, but I mean, wasn't it 2 years before 2 came out? So 40 years for that one will be 2 years from now and whatnot. And they should go down the line. They should. And again, I'll be there, and it'll be better than anything.
Well, if they do, yeah, I'll be.
We're there.
But
we're there.
Yeah, that's the first I saw it. That's the first I heard about them doing.
I don't know about the Donner cut in IMAX though, because that might be a little rough with some of the. Yeah. What is it? What do they? Oh God, just went blank. The test footage, the test screen footage. They had to fill in some of the stuff.
I mean, I think
let me ask. Well, I mean, you can keep talking, but I'm just if you hear any. Sorry to the audience. If you hear any clicking, if you hear any clicks, it's very important. I have to ask. Let me just. They text me something through the screen here, so let me. Yeah.
I don't think they would do the Donner cut. I think they would just stick with the theatrical cut. Or what did it say right there? Actually,
it says Donner cut.
Oh, it says. Oh, okay. It did say the Donner.
But again, that would be interesting. But I mean, Marvel fans, everybody's done. The Dark Knight trilogy did it. There was a marathon. It's a big thing they're doing. I don't know how the Marvel fans did that, because this was a very long time ago. It was Age of Ultron, or it was after one of those films in there. They did a marathon of the Marvel films. I don't know how you do that, because at that time still it was 15 films. I don't know how many films they have. Who cares? No, I'm just kidding. No, but they have a lot of them.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know how you did that.
I want to say I think it was before the most recent one they did it. Even.
Yeah. Well, again, that's. Yeah. Oh, yes. Well, I know they did before Black Panther.
For Black Panther.
Yes, I know. I heard that one, but again, I love that though. It's just true. 40 years. That says it all. 40 years. In the last 40 years of Superman, let's be honest, there's only been 4 true films. There's been some good stuff in there, There's been a few good ones, right? I really, really, you know, I know my weird rating system that I have that you laugh about. So I put, and that's what I mean. I put Batman vs Superman. I loved a lot of stuff that was in there. Man of Steel. Well, we'll talk about it another time, but there's a lot in there that I like, and there's a lot in there that was some great experiences. But they're just in a different category when you look back at what Christopher Reeve did with the character, which was amazing because before they even truly got done with the first film, they were already essentially removing Donner. You know, Donner was sort of being ripped away from this project. That's a whole nother story onto itself. And you know, if you ever want to talk about listening to Sal Khan's voice, listen to Sal Khan do interviews about that. That's a whole nother experience. I can't off the top. I'm sure it's happened. And Hollywood's a crazy place, but I can't think of another, especially a masterpiece, a film that turns out that good that 40 years later has as strong a legs as it does now, and it wasn't even completed the way it was supposed to be, and the key players were being sort of ripped away and shuttled away. And I mean, can you imagine? I mean, look at what happened recently. Look at what's happened with Suicide Squad and Justice League. It's just I wound up really liking Suicide Squad after it's all said and done, and I'm not as, you know, majorly down on Justice League as a lot of other people are. And yeah, I really came out of it liking it a lot, and it's sort of worn off a little bit. I can definitely see a ton of cracks in the armor, so to speak. It turned out decent, okay. It was not a travesty the way people were predicting it was going to be worse than Batman and Robin, all this kind of thing. It's not on that level at all. But they still turned out that way. This film turned into a legendary cornerstone in cinema history, a cinema event, an icon of icons, and you can go down the list, and it's all true and it all fits, right? It's really incredible. It's a truly amazing feat, like that the track that's on the soundtrack, the super feat. That is maybe the ultimate super feat with this film. Is just incredible. With, you know, and much love and appreciation to Richard Donner.
That is, I mean, I hate to be the one to bring it all to the reality of just the basic fact of, but they were for different reasons. Because the other movies where you have that happen, it's usually an issue with the story or a vision issue. Yeah. This one just more seemed to be an issue with the money. From what I've heard on the interviews, it's more like you're spending too much money. We're gonna this and this, or the timeline, not necessarily your story's not or whatever.
You're spending too much money. Says the producers that paid Marlon Brando like $300 bazillion for 30 seconds. I just love that. I just love the outtake of Donner when Brando, when he's like, Ralph or whatever her name is, right? And you hear Donner, no, keep roll, keep going. It's like this is costing money by the second. Just keep going. Brando's doing it on purpose, and
yeah, but yeah,
Jelly Bean. I mean, Kal-El, and you know, but still, every component elevates the next, and that's the mark of that. And that's the other thing too about Superman the movie came out in this time frame when it was just perfect timing. It's why it can't be repeated, and that's understandable because that was the time of epics. I mean, you see, if you've ever seen the Wolfgang Peterson movie, what is it? Troy, is it called Troy?
Troy, yeah.
The movie's a little bit tedious, if I'm being honest, right? But that ending, and I don't mean the action, I mean that final shot. Most films pan, like The Dark Knight pans in on him, right? This is a pan out to show that their the burials and the funeral pyres and stuff. But and it's Sean Bean, of course, but just talking about, like, you know, when they say I lived, let them say I lived in the time of Achilles, the time of Hector. This was the time of epics in Hollywood. And you really can say it in that epic, because again, I talked about The Godfather 2, and, you know, the first Godfather, and Apocalypse Now, and even The Omen. The Omen is just a different kind of film. It was a different era,
right?
And epics were the name of the game, and so think about this from 68 to 78. 68, you have like Once Upon a Time in the West. I think the greatest Western of all, a masterpiece, another masterpiece shot, a masterpiece sequence, one after the other from legendary Sergio Leone. and then it sort of capped off, I think, with this one and being it's a new era of film, and you're taking all those old fables and tales and the idea of what's the westerns and all that. No, this is the new American culture at that time, it's comic books and superheroes, and it's sort of like a 10-year period but it's the epic. That's the destruction of Krypton, the pan into Krypton, the music is done epically. It's just on that scale, the sweeping, panning shots of Smallville and the farm, and that pan away from Jonathan Kent's funeral is just incredible. And then of course John Williams' music. Once again, John Williams' music just, no, I mean John Williams spoken for, right?
Right.
Just icon. The guy just falls asleep and delivers icons, but it's just tremendous effort and period. And every component. That's what you have like with the Godfather films, where there really isn't any wasted space. Even just little offhand comments that are being said by one character it's already building. It's building the story arc, and for you as the audience to have that in your head. There's no wasted space really. It just everything is built on each other, and you could pick any scene out of the Godfather films and just break them down and how masterful they are. And this Superman the movie is exactly the same way. And what that does is when every component elevates the next, that's why there's more earnestness, and entertainment in any of the number of scenes from Superman the movie than pretty much everything that's come since, because it's not, there's a deep respect behind that too. When you have, like I said, when you have that reverence for the material, that scene in the Daily Planet, I was just laughing about the other day. I always think about that when they first meet on the Daily Planet, and just the shaking the bottle, and then it explodes on him, and then I'm sorry, and of course Lois, and I mean why would anybody embarrass total stranger, and Jimmy Olsen, golly gee, it's all set up there. Whereas I'm not trying to crack on this film, because I understand people, I'm sort of taking a risk here, but I get that people have an appreciation for it, and to a certain extent I do get it, although I have quick limits with this little gang of characters. But say how all the Guardians of the Galaxy come together for the first time, when it's just sort of Three Stooges slapstick, and doesn't Rocket Raccoon jump on like Star-Lord's leg, and then like they're rolling around and drag. I mean, it's just Three Stooges, and I there are other parts of the film that I like, but come on, that's how they all come together. Come on, come on, the Avengers. I'm knee deep in it now, but I mean the Avengers, right? And playing the music, and what does he say? Did you miss me, Agent Romanoff, or whatever? And I mean, and going from the moment with no, there are always men to stand above others, and it's the look to your elder, and last time I was in Germany, and it's all, the tone is all over the place with that. Whereas when you show up in the Daily Planet, it's consistent, and then it just builds and builds and builds, and I mean, that's it. That's the key, though. That's why it has a lasting impact with cinema goers all these years later. We're here talking about just what is, it should be a throwaway scene, and maybe that's the problem. Maybe things have changed to where, again, I'm not trying to hate on Man of Steel, but it's really kind of a throwaway scene in the Daily Planet there at the end. It just seems like it's sort of tacked on there. It seems like everybody knows, hey, there's 5 seconds to the movies go almost over, and courtside tickets, and why would you go back to focus on the sleazeball? Just doesn't she makes a snarky remark about the interns, and then turns around and looks at, sorry, right? That, I'm not trying to crack on it, but it came to mind. So you compare that to the other ones. The little things, Clark Kent sliding behind Lois Lane, and she perks up. Yeah, you can watch it, figure it out. Just any more at home like you? No. All of that is just, I mean, it's brilliant. For whatever reason, that's gotten lost in the formula of how they cook these things together now. Think about that sequence between when Clark Kent goes in the Daily Planet, asking about Lois, and from there to when he winds up in Lex Luthor's lair. I mean, there's a smile on both of our faces right now thinking about it, but it's just brilliant. But I just think about, again, every piece of that is just awesome, because he walks in, right? Hey, everybody's seen Lois and stuff, right. And he's standing in front of the TV. Oh, you're blocking the set, Clark. But what's on the TV is setting up that there's going to be this rocket test That's which is the rockets that are going to come into play with Lex Luthor and Superman later, and it's just, to set that up. There's like 7 different layers there, right? Because he's Clark Kent, he's goofy, he's standing in front of the thing, annoying everybody. Mm-hmm. This Clark Kent guy, is this that he's that he plays it like that effing guy in the office is how everybody would see him, right? But he steps away from it, and then again going into Perry White's office, and I just love that too.
You know what you're lacking?
Yeah,
humility.
Humility. No one who has ever watched that with me has never not just broken into laughter with that sequence. I just remember that it's just something you're seriously lacking in, Kent. Humility. No, you got bags of humility, but again, he's still it's his in character and in character,
right?
Or the character's in character, because I'm trying to say, right. But even that though, you're furthering the characterization of Perry White and the Clark Kent character, and then you use the classic Superman traits like the super hearing, Lex Luthor's taunting nature that he always has had in the comics, and Gene Hackman. Come on, Gene Hackman's got it right. Just tiptoeing away, and the Clark to the Superman change, and then John Williams' sheer brilliance is on full display throughout that sequence, because it's just again the music it's building up, and then it's sort of teasing you with the theme, and then it ratchets up, and then it's the kind of motifs within the soundtrack as he's whizzing by the buildings, and it's Superman, and then down in the street, and again it culminates in true Superman fashion, like it could have, pulled right out of a Superman content, from the Golden Age, right? He's spinning down through the ground, and of course even stand back, please, stand, everybody watch out now, and just spinning down there. Right out of the Fleischer serials, right out of any Golden Age comic book you'd pick up, right? Which would have been those are the comics that were there at the time, right? It's always sort of really, really weird to hear somebody now at this time frame when they crack on the Donner films and be like, well, how come they didn't adapt For Tomorrow or All-Star Superman? Oh, yeah, not even Back to the Future was a thing at that point, kids. So there's no, maybe you ought to let us know about this time travel thing. Apparently come on now. That was what was there. The Golden Age was that time frame for Superman. One of the most brilliant moments of the many from the Superman history is he just pushes the door in and just bursts right through it, and Gene Hackman on point is Lex Luthor, right? It's open, come in. Right, and so again,
you'll see you about the door.
Yeah. My attorney will. Would you take the gentleman's cape, and the look that Reeves shoots to Ned Beatty, and then Ned Beatty Otis turns around and does the whole, I don't think he wants me to, Mr. Luthor. It's just the sheer brilliance of that is, like I said, just it's on point. I keep going. I'm thinking to myself, it's like when people say just absolutely on point. Just there's really nothing to quarrel with there. And again, and every step of the way, and when you stop and think about that, that's the sequence from the time frame that he leaped, or well, not even that, from when he showed up in the Daily Planet to when Perry White called him in, to when he tiptoed away, then leaped in, flew on, all that. Just a perfect use of the time, with not a single thing could you look at and say, well, get rid of that. It just hurts the film or hurts the characters. He doesn't fly by a window and Lois Lane was in her apartment boiling tea, and not to bring up anything, but again, by comparison though, there's not, you don't have that
right
in that original film, because everything there from Reeve on point, peak Lex Luthor with Gene Hackman, all that stuff with John Williams and everything, and that's what, maybe 5 minutes? I can't, probably way less than that. Maybe 2.5 minutes maybe of screen time, and that's it. That's the perfect use of cinema right there. It's just brilliant, masterclass, with several masterclass sequences still to go. Well, that's the missing formula, or that's the missing element in the formula as to why you have trouble with maybe I'm sure there's a handful of scenes you could pick out of Batman vs Superman, or probably the million scenes that people would want to pick out of Suicide Squad. You didn't have that in the days because there was an emphasis on that type of thing back then.
Right.
There's nothing, I don't know, again, maybe it's a studio pressure thing, but there shouldn't be anything stopping somebody from going and doing that nowadays. You were talking about the credits. The credits are complex. You think of another movie where the credits are that complex on the front and the back, right? I mean, it's just a true epic for all time, from a time of epics, and it defined what it means for films to be that. And Superman the movie belongs to that, on top of everything that it's already got to deliver. It's everything it has to offer. So it really is the cornerstone moment for I would say adventure cinema and all that kind of. This is 78, so you're talking about precursor to Indiana Jones and all that kind of thing. So
you just mentioned one of the scenes I took out of there. For me, it wasn't so much like all the different scenes. It was always just, I don't know, just a pleasure to watch Reeve on the big screen do his thing. One of my favorite scenes on that is always after the interview, after him and Lois talk, and then he comes into the room, and then she's like, oh, it's starting to go get ready, and then he takes off his glasses, and he has that moment where he's like, he contemplates, I'm gonna tell her I'm Superman. Just to see that on the big screen, I always love that scene, the little transition change from like he's slouched over as Clark.
Yeah.
She turns her back. He all of a sudden straightens up, takes off his glasses, then just in his Superman voice is like, he starts to talk, and then she turns around, and then he just shrivels up, punches back down, glasses.
Yeah. I mean, I was,
instantly changes it. And
on
the big screen. It's like,
because he comes in all golly gee, and then when she's in a daze, of course, but she sort of wanders off to, I don't know, do her makeup or something. Peak John Williams. Yeah. Perfect that. It's a beautiful scene. It's an absolutely beautiful scene. And the music is beautiful. The tone is, like you said, then you get that extra, you just cherish that extra bit from Reeve there. Like you said, I know, the straightening up and the Lois, there's something I need to tell you. And I mean, darn it. Sure, the time for life. I didn't go for a hamburger or something. Yeah. It's one of the first one-shots in, again, this modern cinema that people talk about. I mean, everybody from Spike Lee and Inside Man has a great tracking one-shot. I've heard Alfonso Cuarón has great one-shots in Children of Men. But this is a one-shot where, he drops Lois Lane off as Superman in full costume. And then, good night. And, elevates off of the terrace there and flies away and off. And the camera tracks her into her apartment, and then through towards the front door, and then there's somebody at the door, and then the door opens, and it's Christopher Reeve in full Clark Kent, not looking disheveled or just like, you will believe a man can fly. I mean, that moment is like, you will believe Superman is real, and that's part of the magic of it. And again, when people, I don't think people understand, like when they have little criticisms or they try to nitpick it or they try to say something negative about it, and one of the things they come up with is, it's the old movies and some old movie from the set. I don't think they realize that you're actually heightening how great it is, because no CGI, no computer effects, none of that stuff, and they pulled off a one shot of him flying down, dropping her off, flying away, then walking through and panning through, and he's there as Clark Kent, right there, looking, perfect, right? There's no, no wire, no jump cut, right? No. I always think that's sort of funny when I hear people talk about it being the older one, or sort of everything I've just talked about, how it comes to that time frame. If some people look at it negatively, can you think of another film like that, where when you throw that at it, it's actually heightening the film? Your criticisms of it actually makes it better and stronger, right? Because Jaws, you really can't defend the shark, so to speak. It's got like jowls and stuff, because they had to have the the bolts and stuff running so that they could the mouth could open. It's a mechanical shark. You take a loss with Jaws if you're a Jaws fan, because you're just sit there and, no kidding, they're not. You don't want to actually kill the actor. Right. You don't want to real sharks don't work for union scale or any scale, right? But again, with Superman, that's not there, because like I said, you criticize people that criticize, it's so old and it's much better to watch Namek fight Henry Cavill and all that kind of stuff. And okay, that could be a preference thing, because it looks, Man of Steel effects, some of them look sort of fake, but all this stuff does. Thanos doesn't look real. Get out of here with that. Come on now, don't waste my time with that. Thanos looks real. Get out of here. Come on. With those like ridges, was it on the top of his head or his side of his head? He's got those ridges. You ever been to the dollar store and they got those little squeegee They're like the long tubes you throw in a pool, and they're just like those long tubes that float, and they got the kind of squeegee thing. It's like he looks like he's made out of those. Get out of here. But again, with Superman the movie, I like to see somebody recreate that now and do it without the computer effects. No Photoshop, nothing. No special effects. Do that in one shot now, and I'd like to see you pull it off, right? It's going to have to be somebody, what's the guy that did Birdman and stuff like that. It's going to have to be at the top of your game. All things have to compare to it. That's the other thing. Like at the top of the genre, right? The mob films have The Godfather. The war films have Apocalypse Now. Sci-fi has Star Wars. Comic book superhero movies have Superman the movie. And it's you talk about having to smile and just watching the interviews with I want to say it was both Chris Hemsworth and Loki. What's his name? Tom Hiddleston. And I really want to say it was either the first Thor film or The Dark World. And they were asking him, it's just how do you just the very thought of this whole thing with like comic book movies again, they're so ridiculous on their face value. And listening to Tom Hiddleston talk about that, he was sort of worried and a little bit kind of I'm a terrified actor trying to figure out how am I going to do this, how am I going to make this work. And it's I think he said it's not naturalistic, I think is the phrase of the year. This the Odin sleep and Thor son of Odin of Asgard. It's not Shakespeare. It's something, it's not natural, right? For all I know, he could be lying, but it seemed like a strange thing you would lie about in an interview for a Marvel film. But he talked about, I thought about it, and I went back and watched those first two Superman films and watching Christopher Reeve and how they played off of, General Zod, Terrence Stamp. And he's like, and I said, that's it. Got it. There you go. That's how I figured it out. That was my way into Loki and what we've done. And when they bring up Christopher Reeve, you can hear when he says that, you see Hemsworth is listening and he's like interested and he shakes his head like, yeah, Christopher Reeve, right? And that's what Tom Hiddleston says, that was my way in. That's how I cracked the code. That's it. Christopher Reeve, masterclass, right? So that's what I mean. Even everything that's come now that is so you get compared to it, and again, it occupies that place. If you're going to do any mafia character at all, you have to figure out which side of The Godfather are you coming down on. Are you coming down on trying to be sort of almost a tribute to it or in that vein of it, or are you going the opposite? Just like that's the line. That's it. You have to, that again, that's where it all springs from. Brilliant. And I'll submit all of you to EDL because he can confirm this, but it goes back years, decades that I had this idea that I was just thinking about, like, what would be how would you start a new franchise and do it right and all this kind of stuff. But it was interesting that I look back now that one of my thought processes was before I go forward with the new franchise and the new direction, for a new generation's version of Superman, that I thought you really got to do is before you show that movie, you should show one of the Max Fleischer serials before it and let it play beforehand and just. Because they go back to the 40s, right? So you could pick any number of them. They're all masterful within themselves. But I thought about doing that. I thought about you re-release Superman. That's what I would do. I would again because I'm all about embracing that great history of it. And so to take Christopher Reeve's Superman the movie like it is now, I would re-release. But I also had this idea to release the Fleischer serial. I thought with the new film before the new film, but I thought it'd be something cool for the kids and the audience and stuff. And the theater experience should be something that's special and magical. You're going there to watch magical powers and mystical creatures and heroic superheroes and stuff. So there should be a magic behind it. And there's sort of a wink and a nod at the audience because a lot of the Fleischer serials ended with him turning to the camera as a cartoon animation, turning to the camera and winking. And normally I might get mad, like, man, that was my idea and all this kind of. But when I saw that it would also be presented with an episode. The serial episodes of the Max Fleischer cartoon will play before. I thought, again, it was just we've been waiting for this. I've been waiting for this, and whoever thought of this and got more like all the power in the world, all the praise to them. I hope not just the reverence for the character, but the reverence, but embrace that history that's there. Go out and pick out one of the best episodes of the Super Friends and play it if there is one. No, I'm sure there is. Play it before the next Justice League movie and. Come on now. Pick out an episode of Batman the Animated Series, play it before a Batman movie, or those I think they're a little longer, but Oh, come on! I would love, again, I would love that opening, just for that opening for Batman the Animated Series. The pre credit, sort of a pre credit sequence in a way, that played before every episode. I mean, I would love to see that in 4K and IMAX or whatnot. And so you embrace that history. And yeah, it was probably one of the only times in my life where I had this idea, and I always kept in the back of my mind over the years. And then somebody else did it, but I was like, I'm not. There's not an ounce of animosity. I'm not angry. I'm just thrilled. I'm ecstatic, especially because no matter what, at the end of the day, even if, like I said, they don't take advantage of it, it goes over their head once more. At least there was a time to say, yeah, I lived in the time. I lived in the time of that. I was born and raised during the time of Christopher Reeve movies where he was the Superman. And now 40 years after that original film, I can go back and watch that movie again and this awesome experience. And they're going to throw a Max Fleischer cartoon serial with it beforehand. The animated series, the legendary, it's the Fleischer serials. Those serial episodes are better than most of the movies that have come since then. I'll stand by the Fleischer serials being better than most of the superhero movies that have come since the 40s. My family, the rest of them, most of them are not super fans, or no pun intended, but they're not like ultra fans, right? And the idea that I got to hear a couple of stories and then just see the kind of recognition and the look on my grandmother's faces, my great grandmother and my grandmother, because they recognized the Kirk Alyn serial I was watching it on. They recognized and remembered it, and had a couple of quick little stories about it, and just that time frame, that magical time, being able to go to the movies and all that kind of stuff, and to recognize the Fleischer Serials. Used to play, it was the war years. Oh, we were at war and all that kind of, just the depression. The idea of, you look at your grandparents, and so there's my grandmother and great grandmother, and they're old, and you think you just, to frame that in your mind, these little girls, or and then a young lady, mother to a little girl, running around during the Depression and World War II era America, and being able to go into a theater and catch a serial and catching a Kirk Alyn thing, and then others that remember when George Reeves was the man, and that there were they had kids jumping out of trees and a rash of broken arms, during the 1950s, because kids were trying to jump off of things with the towel. It sort of birthed the towel and trying to emulate the cape, and so it was George Reeves. There's that history to that. It goes all the way back to then. And that I was lucky enough to get these films that are so good. You just hope that somebody who's an overseer or who's in charge, that they realize that there is, it doesn't matter if it's an escape. It doesn't matter if, I don't expect people to be so obsessed with things the way I am. It's just sort of happened that way for me. But there are a lot of us out there like that. And then there are a lot of people that just need that escape to go watch a movie on a Friday night, off of work or something. Other people that just, enjoy filmmaking or in the industry and whatnot. But that magic can still be there, and that's what's really going to put people in the seats. That's what the Marvel fans of there have been blessed to have that for them right now, and that to be able to talk about the experiences of leaving the theater and looking. They didn't even know, like they were just like the characters, not knowing what shawarma is and trying to figure it out. And just the idea, like I said, that I thought about. Think about how awesome it was back in a very scary world in World War II Depression era, but that you go to the theater, and it was a big thing. Go to the theater, and the popcorn and the sweets and the candy, and it's like this theater, the way they've rebuilt it. They're everywhere. It's not like I don't just live in Theaterville. They're all over the place, and it's this great theater that I'm going to get to go to. It's got good, good sweets, good candy, fresh soda, and the popcorn. I'll be able to sit down and watch a Fleischer serial and watch Chris Reeve, what's everyone before me got to do, and then now here's my little. So if you were to, again, if you're an overseer, if you can capture just a little bit of that, because that's all that was missing from the current state of movies recently. It's on the level of tragedy that some of the recent superhero movies on both sides. So there's been some flubs for the Spider-Man character and the Batman character as well, not just Superman. And then, let's just call it what it is. Star Wars. That magic was totally out. Especially in Star Wars most recently. It's just completely gone. And it's foolish to not pay reverence to that. And it's absolutely foolish to sever that.
What's that?
Oh, a little message. But just gave a break. So sorry for all you in the audience. I'll try to, hopefully that didn't ding your eardrums out. Yeah, I was just saying, but for a kid that's got no problems in the world, maybe somebody's overprivileged or some poor kid on some horrible country or county, and unfortunately in America, they they it's better to have an escape with that than some of the other things that people can escape with, and that ultimately is where it all comes down.
I mean, yeah, just you said it perfectly right there. But yeah, I'll go back to it. How great this movie is. That 40 years, we're still talking about it. It's still the one to look at. I mean, even in the tiniest ways, as the eras go on, you'll have more people saying, well, we wanted to do and they might pick a different movie. We wanted to do this. But always in the core, there will always be that trace that still leads back to Superman, the movie, where it all started. As far away as we go from it, I don't remember what movie it was, but I heard someone recently, well, not recently, it was a while ago, they tried to compare when they did their movie to a different movie. I think they wanted to, it was Batman Begins. They wanted to try and compare it to what they were doing with Batman Begins.
It was Spider-Man Homecoming.
Oh, was this? I don't remember which one.
They were talking about that. But anyway, sorry.
Okay, but overall, okay, so they wanted to do it like Batman Begins, and Batman Begins was done trying to do Superman the movie. So right. That's just how great that this movie is. The lineage is going to be there. It's always, eventually, people might forget where. I hope that doesn't happen. I hope, and that's up to Warner Bros. To make sure to keep doing things like this 40 years, remind people. But it's there. Down the line, they might be like, well, I got it from this. Well, do you know where that got it from? Superman the movie. That's where that came from. So it's such a great movie. And it was definitely a great treat. Getting to go watch it. It was last Sunday. I watched it in the theater. Unfortunately, I missed the first first minute of the Fleischer short.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because I didn't realize it was going to be on until the drive there. And my brother was like, oh, no, they're going to show a Fleischer short, too. And I was like, oh, great. Now I'm going to miss part of something. But I came in during that, and that was something. Be able to sit there, watch a nice short, and just sitting there, it's like, oh, this is good. This is good. And then just the moment when the screen lights turn out, screen comes up with the little comic shot and the girl voicing over.
Yeah.
And then that fades out.
Yeah.
And the music starts going. And funny story, when the comic shot comes in, something legit got in my eye. Legit got in my eye.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
It's legit. So I was like,
floater in the theater.
And I was like, oh, Jesus, what the heck? And I was like, oh, great, it's going to look like I'm crying over this. Like there's a tear, but it's a legit thing. And I'm sitting there moments later after it comes out and the music starts. Then out of my other eye,
the real one,
there comes the one from the movie. Then it's like, oh, well, that's a legit one. That's a movie caused one right there. But no, it's you'll have fun. It'll be something. And especially like I said, I was expecting to kind of sit back and be like, oh, there's an intro, but I guess it all hit me. Like here I am, 40 years later, and I'm watching this on the big screen. And so when the music hit, it kind of just all hit at that moment. So it was like, oh no, I didn't expect that to happen.
I'll let this one go. I'm actually curious what your thoughts are on it, about everything. But at the end of Man of Steel, when he snaps Zod's neck. I mean, in classic Zack Snyder fashion, because he doesn't just snap his neck, but he snaps it with a sonic boom. There really is a sonic boom in the air when he does it. And the idea was that Zod is using his heat vision. He's going to massacre this poor family, and he's begging him to stop. And then, again, Goyer talked about purposely putting him in that position to give him this awful Sophie's Choice. Maybe I should quickly explain. Sophie's Choice is a concentration camp movie about a mother who has to choose between which child is, which child do you choose? Which child do you sacrifice to the most horrific evil? So that's purposely pigeonholing Superman into that. It's a tricky thing to try to pull that off. And if you actually watch the movie, I don't think that family survived. I'm pretty sure Superman just sat there and watched Zod slice them apart and melt their insides and murder them in the most horrific way. And then I think you're supposed to understand that. Even if they're alive, it wasn't brought up in the sequel. And then that's just really bad filmmaking. So the way the film, again, you can only follow the track that the film puts you on. So pretty sure Superman just sat there begging and pleading with Zod, and then only after he horrifically, with a child, so he horrifically decapitated a child and then murdered a family, and then Superman said, "Oh, God, I got no choice left," and then just snapped his. I mean, that's pretty grim. That's probably as grim as it's. Let's put it this way. I hope that's as grim as it ever gets with Superman. It's pretty bad. After you've already seen people come right into your face in 3D, 3,000 miles up in the air, and then realize they're being slammed back down. It's something else. Forget about all that. Why would you not take the opportunity to set up in some way with some MacGuffin, that little Superman thing or whatever? Superman could keep that on his belt, and he could have pulled it out and thrown that, and it would have been like opening up a little portal to the Phantom Zone. So imagine Michael Shannon Zod now is fighting with all his strength and scratching on the ground and breaking statues and all this kind of trying to hold on as he's trying to prevent himself from being sucked into this mini Phantoms in his pocket. Could be his own little pocket universe like the old comic, right? Superman's holding back the family and Lois, and your return to where the movie started, where he's completely snapped and I will find him. Now it's that same thing, like screaming at him, no, Cal, this isn't the end, whatever, right? Just right. Whatever, however he wants to play it. So he could just play it like, I will come back, or I will kill them, whatever you pick for him to say, right? Whatever. He's letting Superman know this is now a personal mission of his, a personal project of his to exact revenge, not only on Superman, but on these humans and all that kind of scene. And so that the grandiose music that was playing at the beginning of the film, that, that dun, dun, but just they bring it back and ratchet it up. And so Hans Zimmer likes to reuse anyway. So, and Zod is fighting, but he's not as strong as Superman, so he's not going to be able to pull himself from the Phantom Zone. But as he's, again, going even more mad, he's looking at the family and Lois and Superman, and then however you want to set it up, right? But the final couple of lines before he pulls in is that you will all kneel before Zod. And he gets pulled into the Phantom. They're obviously not thinking the same thing you're thinking, but I mean, it was right there, right for you. You would have been the most perfect arc. And just that little change to try to give that little, you've made it your own. He's a different Zod. He's a Zod who was a straightforward military general that's going crazy because the world is collapsing. You've done it. It's your own take. It's your own version. It's all yours, but you set that up and just with that little flavor of the original. So now you've created a whole new arc for why he's obsessed with that whole kneel before Zod. And there you go. That would have been the true Batman Begins Dark Knight trilogy, kind of building this arc for the villain as well as the hero. And it's not going to be set up well, but he got no choice, going to reach to his belt, and something like that's going to happen, and not instead to go with the other direction because we're more modern and this is how we're going to do it. And, Superman facing Sophie's Choice and all this kind of thing. And you realize, geez, man, oh my God, so then forcing Superman into having to this really cruel, horrific way to even kill a Kryptonian is just like, there again, there's the juxtaposition. We don't have to see Cavill in the trunks. You don't have to see Cavill even repeat the exact line. He doesn't have to, be all kind of Boy Scout and good evening, Miss Lane. He doesn't have to do that. But that, to me, I thought is a good example that, again, to show that reverence for it, and just that's how you, in my mind, that's how you pick, and it's right there. It's right in front of them, and I think that's the way out. That's the ticket, and that, I don't know, maybe you totally disagree on it, but wouldn't that have been kind of, I don't, for lack of a better word, but wouldn't that have been kind of a better way to kind of flesh Man of Steel out? Or don't you think that would have left a better taste in a lot of people's mouths than the way it went down?
Oh, as far as leaving a better taste, yeah, easily. It wouldn't. That's not even a question. A lot of people still are on the whole neck snap. Even take out of consideration what happened with the family. I remember when I first heard spoilers, they said, "Oh, it's after they get killed." So at least I know at least some people had that same thought of like, "Oh, they got killed" or whatever. Yeah. I've always been on the thought of like, "Nah, he probably did it right before," but I don't know. But I do see where you're coming from on there, because yeah, like I said, the first one I heard on that was before it was confirmed. It sounded like, oh, maybe someone's just saying whatever. Was he does it after Zod kills a family? So I don't know. They never really go one way or the other on that. I don't think.
But again, rather than leave it so bleak, the other way builds something and builds to something, especially because Michael Shannon played it so. I love the psychosis, the breaking points that he goes through in that film. And I'm not trying to shoehorn back into putting a shine on the original film. It just is what it is. But yeah, just that at the end of that film and talking to the warden and all that, that's sort of, he's reached Superman as a character has reached an arc, not necessarily knowing exactly how he was going to use his abilities and trying to play football or trying to show off with, and that's what Jonathan Kent, talks to him about and whatnot. So,
well, another shot that I always liked was at the end, not the end, but after he finds Lois, and when she's died from the earthquake, and she's buried in the rubble. I always like that one shot where it tracks different shots of it. And you go to the overhead shot where you see the trail of the earthquake, and then the car, and then him with her outside.
Right. Yeah, it's sort of I kind of took it to mean the passage of time a little bit, but yeah, you mean I know what you're saying. Yeah, it sort of fades in different shots as he's standing there.
Well, the main one, the last one where it's overhead, I always just thought, I mean, for a grim of a situation as it is, I always thought it was a beautiful shot.
Yeah.
And then seeing it on the big screen, I was just like, yeah, there's that shot. Yeah.
It's the what is it, the fault line.
Yeah.
The earthquake is creating all these little mini fissures and fault lines. The one that follows up to her car. Yeah. Although,
it just kind of reminded me, kind of like a timeline, and then it just stops.
Yeah.
Right there, it's like it stops right there at the car, and then
there you go.
Yeah, and
timeline, and then stops right there because time will forever stop there essentially after he. Although. Probably looking at that one. Maybe that one we're looking into a little too much because I know that wasn't the original ending. But again, though, it's sort of you create your own luck in that way. When you're putting in that much effort and detail, you're going to create your own luck.
Right.
And so that's just one of the things where it. Again, a million different things you can say about that film, but ultimately, it's just just an absolute. Enjoyable, masterpiece. Would just wound up, somehow being able to merge iconic sequences and within these masterclass filmmaking moments and on and on from there with just at the right time with everybody bringing their best effort. You sort of peak again, the peak. Brando at his peak. Before the sort of tail off, and Gene Hackman at his peak coming off of all the films he was in, and Chris Reeve obviously. Bursting on the scene like Superman bursting through a wall and all that kind of stuff. So it's just this, and again, an excellent piece of cinema history. And, as we pointed out, the most important pivot point in the history of comic book and superhero films for all time that, as you said, will continue to resonate on and on forever from there. But, we'll, I'm definitely obviously I'm gonna follow up afterwards after I have mine, and then we'll probably should just do like a almost like a reactions of what were our experience of seeing it on the big screen. You've had your moment. I'm closing in on mine here pretty soon, but everybody deserves to have the opportunity to enjoy this thing. So I hope if there's anybody out there that maybe they didn't, maybe they haven't known about it, maybe they haven't seen it, so maybe you will now, and it's worth the time, and it's going to be well worth the time spent to experience this. And again, it's like going back and watching any of the best films out of any genre, and so I'm happy to bring Scrapsta in here. We could help let you in and guide you, and if you're grateful at all, well, don't thank us. We're all part of the same team. That's right, I set that up. Good night, everybody. Goodbye.